for this very good sharing session. So, today's topic will be followed by another important subject, which is designing and developing a questionnaire, which will be presented by our friend, Mr. Onu Kogu Humphrey Francisco, next Thursday on the 26th of November 2020. So today's topic will be just a light or just a very light subject, which is focusing on the tips to design and conduct a survey questions. So regardless of who you are, whether you are doing masters or even a PhD or your first degree, we can all agree that survey is one of the most popular method of collecting opinions and views from our respondents to convert them into a primary data source, right? So let's go on to the first slide. What is a survey? Survey is a scientific social research method that involves selecting sample of people to answer some questions, designing a standardized questionnaire to collect information or opinion to answer the research questions, administering the questionnaire, and then after we've administered the questionnaire, we need to code the responses in a standardized form, usually in numbers. And then you need to analyze the results to provide descriptions about the population of your study. Then the last but not least, to generalize the results to the population from which the sample was drawn. So this is what you have to consider before you conduct a survey. First of all, you need to design the survey first. So when you design the survey, there are many ways to design the survey. One of them is whether you can, or a survey, make sure to email the original author for permission. So you do not have to worry, because usually the original author will gladly respond to your email. Because through my experience, today I emailed the original author of the questionnaire. My email was respond right after that, the next day. So if you have a questionnaire that you think is good, that you find in any article, any published journal, you have to make sure that you get the permission from the original author. Or you can even purchase established questionnaires, which would be a bit costly. The next thing you can do is, you have to consider is, how are you going to administer the survey? Whether you want to pay someone to become the enumerator to help you collect or carry out the service for you. Then you need to code and enter the data into SPSS or any other softwares. After that, of course, we need to analyze and interpret the data. And last, you have to write the results and present your findings. So why do we conduct a survey in the first place? Survey is good because you can collect exclusive data or information that are not available from other sources. We call this as primary data. Next is where you can find out respondents' attitude and opinions. And plus, survey can provide a very useful comparable information from everyone taking the survey, which can be very meaningful analysis. For example, if you conducted a program and then you think that the program is very successful, but after you conducted a survey asking about the response from the participants of the event, then you might find out what are the bad side or the good side of the survey, whether it's really successful or not. So people can actually do go through many different opinions of a certain event if you conduct a survey after a certain event. And lastly, it can be generalized to the population of your study. Okay, so there are two types of questions. We have open-ended questions, and we also have closed-ended questions. So what are open-ended questions? Open-ended questions usually allow for more subtle responses and perhaps more precise measurement. Maybe the researcher does not know how people are likely to respond to your questions. So you ask open-ended questions. Sometimes when the researcher wants to avoid the influence in the responses, therefore they ask open-ended questions. One example of an open-ended question is, what do you think about climate change? You might get a very short answer to this, or you might even get a whole essay on what they think about climate change. But close-ended questions, it ensures uniformity. Okay, so the respondent can select select answers from among the list of possible responses. And so it is easier for the subject to answer and much easier for the researcher to analyze. So one example of a close-ended question is, how often do you recycle? The respondent can either answer never, rarely, occasionally, sometimes, and very frequently. So we have, this is called Likert scale. So we have example of answers for Likert scales, like agreement. So you have, if you want to ask about agreement, you can use strongly agree, undecided, disagree, or strongly disagree. Or if you want to ask about frequency of a behavior or of a certain behavior, you can use very frequently, occasionally, rarely, or never. Then you can also ask about importance. So you can use very important, moderately important, slightly important, and not important. If you were to ask about satisfaction, you can use very satisfied, neither dissatisfied, or you can use neutral, dissatisfied, and very dissatisfied. Sometimes you can ask about the quality of a certain product or a certain event or a certain program, whether it's very good, acceptable, poor, and very poor. So there are many more, and there are many other examples. You can either use 7 Likert scales, or you can use 3. Some people use 3. It depends on the study or your research. So what are good questions? Good questions is when you use very clear and use simple language. The rule of thumb is, if you find a word which has more than 6 or 7 letters or alphabets in it, there must be another word which is simpler to use to make it easier for the respondents to answer the questions. Next, it should be concise, it should be specific and relevant to the selected respondent, and also realistic. So these are the things that you need to avoid in a survey. You have to avoid bias terms. Okay, bias terms is when the survey question shows tendency on a certain opinion before asking the questions. So make sure to avoid those kind of questions. Next, you should avoid double bearing. What is double bearing? This will happen when you asked about 2 things in a single sentence. Okay, we are going to look at that afterwards. Then you should also avoid double negatives. Double negatives is when the questions includes 2 negative statements in one single sentence. Okay. Okay, good survey questions must also have clarity and consistency, but almost the same to every respondent. And as usual, you have to choose simple over specialized words, and it's better to keep it short and simple because short questions are the best. And then the consistency, you should have the same direction or similar as possible to avoid double negative questions, and make sure that you cluster similar types of items together. So when you have a questionnaire or a survey, the basic formats that we use, the first one is self-administered paper pencil survey, which is one of the most popular methods used by most researchers. This is when you have access to the respondents and you can give out the paper and you can administer the questionnaire or the survey yourself. The next way or the next method is by using electronic survey. So electronic survey is one of the most recent popular method used by researchers. Some people use SurveyMonkey, some use Google Forms, Sogo Survey, sometimes ProProf Survey Maker. We have Typeform, Zoho Survey, Survey Planet, Survey Gizmo, and many more out there. Sometimes you can also email the survey to the selected respondents, or if you do not have, if you need to contact the respondent, but it can only be contacted by telephone, some people use telephone interview to read the questionnaires and the survey to the respondents. Then we also have face-to-face interview and also focus group. So let me go through the advantages of using online surveys. So this is a faster medium to reach the target audience. In comparison to the other survey techniques, such as pen and pencil and paper surveys, or online surveys are exceedingly fast in acquiring feedback from respondents. So the best thing about an online survey nowadays is that you can get a quick link to your survey by generating a QR code and show it to a big screen, or you can even show it on your smartphone for people to scan the question instantly. That is very easy nowadays. Because, okay, the next point is you can get real-time analysis. So after collecting the information, the analysis can be obtained really quickly. Okay, it's instantly. And then it's very cost efficient because you do not print any papers, saves the environment, and then minimum margin of error. The next one is very convenient to understand for the respondents. Also, it saves the researchers time because they are very quick to configure and send, and due to the ease, they tend to save the researchers time. And the best part is respondents are more truthful when answering an online survey. Okay. Before you actually start your survey, make sure you have instructions to the respondents. Why? Because it can provide a general instruction in beginning of the self-administered survey, where you can explain the reason why you're doing the survey and why the answers are important and how to answer the questions. You can also stress confidentiality if you need, and it also provides specific instructions to questions as necessary. So here I have an example of an instruction before you start the questionnaire. The following questions ask about your recycling experience. Please provide us with your recycling experience by circling one of the responses options listed below each statement. There are no right or wrong answers. All replies are confidential, so give your honest opinion on each of the statements. Please do not discuss your answers with other people. It is your opinion which matters. Even though it may be hard to decide, please be sure to answer all questions. Thank you for your help. These are the kind of instruction you can give to the respondents before they go to the questions. Okay, the first thing after you've done or you've designed a questionnaire, make sure you validate your questionnaire by using experts' opinion on your survey questions. At least 3 to 6 experts, and some studies have even need more than 6 experts, sometimes even up to 10 experts to validate your questionnaire. And once the experts have given their comments, make sure you improvise your survey based on the validator's comment. Then only you can distribute your questionnaire. But before that, you need to do pre-testing. Okay, what is pre-testing? Pre-testing is when you have a few people to read out aloud your questions. And while they are reading the questions, some improvisations can be made. This is because pre-test can ensure that the survey questions are clearly designed, that the response options as well as the questions are comprehensive, okay, understandable, relevant, and mutually exclusive in the point of view of the respondents of the survey. A pretest is a method of making sure both the researcher and the respondents interpret the survey in the same way. A pretest should be done in order to avoid instances such as obscure terminology, unfamiliar references, or ambiguous words or phrases that the author of the survey did not detect in the first place. So this is one of the very good method or procedure for you to test out the questions or the surveys that you've designed. Before after you validated the questionnaire and after you pre-tested, then only you can conduct a pilot study. Okay, make sure you conduct a pilot study because pilot studies can play a very important role prior to conducting a full-scale research project. A pilot study or a pilot project or a pilot test or pilot experiment is a small-scale preliminary study conducted by the researcher to evaluate feasibility, duration, and costs so that the researcher will be able to improve upon the study design before conducting the actual survey. So, let's now look at the good and bad examples of questions. Okay, so first is you have to use simple language. It is better if you ask this way: how often do you recycle your waste? Instead of how often do you have the intention to reduce your carbon footprint by performing recycling? So easier question or use simpler language will be much better. The next example, you have to make sure that the questions are concise. For example, is there any recycling facilities in your neighborhood? Instead of, sometimes the authorities do not supply satisfactory services for the citizen to perform recycling. Does your neighborhood provide facilities to facilitate you in recycling your waste? So it's not very concise if you ask like that. Okay, the next one is do not use negatives, okay, or double negatives. Okay, I give you example of double negatives. I do not find the idea of recycling as a waste of time. So you have I do not find is negative. A waste of time is another negative statement. So when you have these two together, you'll be very awkward and recycling is a good behavior. Recycling is a good behavior. As simple as that. Example, don't you agree with the idea that recycling can be rewarding sometimes? Here you have already put the idea to the respondent. Instead, you should ask, recycling is a rewarding activity, true or false? Or do you agree that recycling is a rewarding activity? And you have to put the double barrel, which means two statements are asked in one single question. For example, my friends and family. So whether they should answer friends or whether they should answer family. It could be that the family think that recycling is good, but their friends don't think that recycling is good. So you should separate these two and turn them into two statements. My friends think that household waste recycling is a good thing to do, and my family thinks that household waste recycling is a good thing to do. Okay, next, make sure that the options for the response is mutually exclusive. What does it mean by mutually exclusive? For example, if I have a statement or a question, how many times do you clean your house in a week? So when you answer, a good example is you have 0, 1 to 3 times or more than 3 times. But if you look at the bad example, 0 to 1 time, 1 to 3 times, and 3 times or maybe more. If I were to answer this question and I only clean my house once a week, I do not know whether to answer 0 to 1 time or 1 to 3 times. So make sure that the options for the responses is mutually exclusive and doesn't happen. This kind of example doesn't happen. Okay, this is just another tip. If you have any incentive, like free gifts or a voucher or a lucky draw or anything or certificate, anything that you can give to your respondents for appreciating them for taking time to answer your questionnaire, please do, because it can increase your response rate. So you may want to offer your respondents a little something extra if you're asking them to fill out a very long 10-page survey, or it doesn't matter if it's a long survey or not. It shows that you value their time and appreciate their willingness to spend their precious time on answering your survey. Thank you. I think that's all for my sharing today. Dr. Ameh.